Welcome to Super Mario Bros. Bonanza, the show where I'll be reviewing every single Super Mario platformer and ranking them from best to worst. In the past I ranked the first 18 mainline games, and now it's time to tackle those that have been remade. Last time I reviewed Super Mario Deluxe and the Super Mario Advance series. This week I'll be covering Super Mario 64 DS is a Nintendo DS game that released towards the end of 2004 in the US and Japan, early 2005 elsewhere, each launch day correlating with the release of the console in that region. While Nintendo Research and Development 2 handled the development for the Deluxe and Advance games, merging with Nintendo Software Planning and Development Division ended that particular initiative. Instead, Nintendo Entertainment Analysis and Development, arguably the main Nintendo development division at the time, and the developers of the original Mario 64, took up the mantle. Shigeru Miyamoto himself stepped in as producer and supervising director, with Shinichi Ikematsu directing. Unlike the All-Stars, Deluxe, or Advance remakes, where the goal was to closely emulate games with minor visual and gameplay updates, the 64DS project from the get-go set out to do much more. Throughout much of the original Mario 64's development, Luigi was intended to be playable in a co-op mode. While memory issues and camera controls eventually landed this mode on the chopping block, the idea clearly persisted. Entering the ideation and development of 64DS, it was both implemented and fully expanded upon. Now not only are Mario and Luigi playable, but Yoshi and Wario too, each with their own stats and powers to differentiate one from another. The game was first revealed during E3 2004, then named Super Mario 64 X4, and showcased this update on the then unannounced Nintendo DS. This iteration showed all 4 playable characters running through various areas and even facing off against Bowser, albeit in a stage very dissimilar from the main game's arenas. Also, this version of the game had courses selectable from the touchscreen instead of through exploring Peach's castle, and while in single-player mode the current character was toggled via tapping the screen, all indicating that this version was closer to a demo than the final product. The version shown later that year was in a much more finalized state. During the announcement of the Nintendo DS later that November, the game was fully revealed as Super Mario 64 DS. This reveal confirmed that the game would be primarily a single-player adventure featuring the 4 playable characters from the earlier demo. It would also have a suite of touch-based minigames to enjoy and feature a multiplayer mode. The developers at Nintendo SP&D did much more to the game than allowing 3 more characters to run around these existing levels. Every aspect of the game was altered, at least in some way. The most substantial being how the game now begins with Yoshi as the playable character. Mario, Luigi, and Wario must be unlocked via their own distinct levels and boss encounters. All the courses were also updated. Each now includes a 7th star to collect, and many of the existing stars were altered, swapped, or in some cases removed and replaced. The power blocks have also been reduced. Now, instead of different blocks allowing Mario to have different powers, instead one type of block gives each of the characters their own unique power. Mario can fly with a wing cap or puff into a balloon. It's context sensitive. Yoshi breathes fire, Luigi turns invisible, and Wario turns metal. Any stage that would have had a wing cap grants Mario the wing cap, otherwise he gets the balloon. Each element also received a massive visual overhaul. Most of the textures were updated to be more detailed. The game no longer relied on texture filtering, which is the process of blending where textures connect with one another to make a smooth pattern, and all the models were reworked, with many that were originally sprites now having proper polygons. Mario, Yoshi, and Bowser are now all on model. That is to say, they now much more closely resemble their appearances in Sunshine, which is how they persist to look in perpetuity. Then things like bob-ombs, coins, scuttlebugs, swoops, sniffets are all now rendered as modern 3D objects, and in some cases are depicted much closer to how they either looked in 2D or how they now look in 3D. Super Mario 64 DS released to largely favorable reviews. Most enjoyed the new content, many appreciated the stars and playable characters and minigames, but a reoccurring sentiment was the controls. The lack of a true analog stick made the game tough to play. That and the fairly bare-bones multiplayer that seemed more tacked on than anything, which did not affect the sales. 64DS landed as the 10th best-selling DS game with just over 11.06 million cartridges sold, the best-selling handheld Mario since Mario Land 2. And of course, I had one of those cartridges, well, at this point, 2, maybe 3? I haven't always been good to my games. Both my brother and I remember getting our very first Nintendo DS and our copy of Super Mario 64 DS as a birthday present. Of course, memory is fallible, especially when it's been so long, and the DS released early enough in November that it could very well have been a Christmas present, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona, so the weather would have been roughly the same during either. It's tough to say for sure. What I can remember is that we would have gotten it within the year it released, and I played so much of that console, so much of this game. See, for many people, their introduction to Super Mario 64 was set in front of a cathode ray tube television set holding one of the worst designed controllers ever made. For me, it was with this silver, prone to breaking dual screen hovering inches from my face, and I took this machine everywhere. I first learned the secret of the slide, looking up to the light in the foyer, the mysterious fourth door, the variable water levels in Wet-Dry World, the time stopping in the clock, bringing this game to school and discussing it with others. I spent countless hours sorting bombs or keeping Mario from falling or listening to that floating head laugh in the minigame, and I have the fondest of memories connecting with other classmates playing what I dubbed at the time My Star, as we battled each other in the multiplayer during Summer Kid Zone, at least before moving on to that Metroid demo or Mario Kart DS when that released. To this day, when I think of Super Mario 64, I think of its DS remake. I think of Yoshi, the extra bunnies, the extra stars, the minigames, to the point where when I first played Throwback Galaxy in Super Mario Galaxy 2, I was wondering where that extra platform around the back went. When Nintendo announced Mario 3D All-Stars, I was annoyed that Nintendo didn't even try to bring the extra stars and updates from 64DS into the package. Also, where's Galaxy 2? With the release of 3D All-Stars and the subsequent release of 64 on the Nintendo Switch Online Plus Expansion Pack service, all of my most recent playthroughs of 64 have been on the Switch-ported original version, and my time with it has always been mildly frustrating. Even my most recent, when I used the N64 Switch controller, I missed all the fun things 64DS brought, and the controls were just slightly unrefined, just different enough from its closest contemporary, Sunshine, that I couldn't get over it. When it was finally time to replay my favorite version, I was of course incredibly excited, but also reserved. Would this game really look as good as I remembered? What about the controls? Would I be able to put up with the D-pad and the touchscreen? And are those extra stars actually good? Super Mario 64 DS is great. It is the definitive version of Super Mario 64. It took everything that was great about the original, polished it with more precise controls and more detailed visuals, added great new elements with the extra characters and updated levels, making it the ultimate adventure through Peach's Castle. End of review. Goodbye. Okay, maybe I jumped the canon just a bit. 64DS regularly integrated its updates throughout the entire game. Some are more subtle, many mostly visual, then some of the bigger changes are presented front and center. Even the introductory cutscene presents an entirely new world. The castle looks largely the same, but all the surfaces are more detailed. Then of course Mario, then Luigi, then Wario jump out of their own pipes, run into the castle, and sometime later the Lakitu Bros wake up Yoshi to start the adventure proper. The rest of the game continues this. The game is remarkably similar to the original, until it's not. Most of the levels have some altered geography in at least one way or another. Sometimes it's a large platform wrapping around Whomp's fortress, sometimes it's a new bridge making Hazy Maze Cave a tad bit easier. Each of course has also had their stars reworked. They were all given a brand new one, which usually wound up being a Switch star. These tasked the players to get from a star button to the star location before the timer runs out. Good luck! Silver stars were also added to the game. Tick-Tock Clock, or Bob-omb Battlefield, now require collecting 5 silver stars. And if the player is hit while carrying one, the star will pop out and bounce around until collected again. Other stars were altered in more subtle ways. King Bob-omb must be fought twice, once with Yoshi spitting bombs at him, the next the normal way. The first star in Hazy Maze Cave now requires Wario to smash a boulder on the island. The Womp-a-Top Tick-Tock Clock now has a different layout. Many of the changes are due to the newly added characters and their unique power sets. The Room with the Secret Slide level has been expanded to have 5 new doors. 3 are clearly designed based on the missing characters, the 4th mysteriously blank, and the 5th leads to the Rec Room, the in-game area to access the minigames. The keys to each character's door are unlocked via an entirely new stage, culminating with a fight against a menacing, often mustachioed master. The Goom Boss, King Boo, which was seemingly misnamed as Big Boo, and Chief Chili hold the keys for Mario, Luigi, and Wario respectively. Although the Goom Boss battle was the only wholly unique fight. Hey, and apparently, I'm just reading this right now. He's from Paper Mario? I guess? News to me, that's the only Paper Mario I haven't played was the original. Each character can run and jump, although their speeds and heights vary. Yoshi can eat most enemies with their tongue, can do their patented mid-air hover, but they can't punch anything. Mario plays much like in the original and is the only character who can wall jump. Wall jumping now also acts like it does in Sunshine, no more bouncing off walls. Luigi can run on water for a short time, swims the fastest, has a slower descent while jumping, and has the best backflip. He gracefully spins as he gently descends towards the ground. Then there's Wario. He's strong, the only character who can break the black bricks and can stomp posts in with a single pound. But he's slow, doesn't jump very high or very far, isn't all that much fun to play as in general. After being unlocked, or in some cases before, any of the characters can turn into any of the others, sans Yoshi, by putting on their hats, which can be found throughout the level, as is the style nowadays. Sometimes a Goomba's wearing one, maybe it's just lying around, or if playing as Yoshi, a cap can be selected before starting the mission. Regardless of who the starting character is, the character-worn cap determines the active moveset and the item block power-up. This, for me, meant that the best character to play as was almost always Yoshi. Start the level with whichever hat I need, if necessary, and as long as I didn't get hit and lose the cap, I was good to go. That being said, it was always weird seeing, say, Luigi jumping around, but hearing Yoshi's voice clips come out. Of course, I grew up with these updates. For me, this is the default Mario 64. All these years later, I still adore each and every one of them, and it was fun to see what these developers were able to do with these levels 8 years after the release of the original. I loved having to plan out and execute upon the fastest route for the Switch Star levels, although I'll admit, towards the end, the formula of the 7th star almost always being one became a bit rote, and I especially enjoyed the addition of the Silver Stars. The added challenge of not getting hit while tracking down each one was really fun, and in the panic induced when I did get hit, helplessly seeing the star go wildly bouncing away while the star I just unlocked was bouncing in a completely different direction added so much to the collection process. One thing I've learned about myself throughout this series is that the aesthetics of a game have a bigger impact on my enjoyment than I previously thought, and I find 64 DS to be a more beautiful game than the original. To me, this version of Mario looks right. Even though he's chunkier than his Sunshine version, even though during the final cutscene his model isn't detailed enough to hold up the peace sign, this applies to the rest of the cast as well. I like all the updated designs more than their originals. It was also nice how the 2D enemies, and especially the coins, are now properly modeled. Sprites floating around were good enough at the time, but the sense of physicality the 3D models bring to the world makes them feel so much more real. And while the draw distance still isn't the best, I found it much more bearable than in the original. Plus, the fancier textures look so good. Everything looks similar enough to evoke the same emotion, but I enjoy looking at them so much more. Koji Kondo's music from the original was all reused, with new tracks orchestrated by Kenta Nagata. The audio technically took a hit on the handheld speakers, but unless I go out of my way to compare the DS tracks to the originals, they sound good enough to me. Now for the thing I was the most worried about, the controls. I admit they could be better. The team was clearly limited by the original DS and its lack of a proper joystick. Of the two methods of controlling the game, by touching the bottom screen or by using the D-pad, both left much to be desired. But I played Super Mario 64 DS on my Fire Emblem Fates branded new Nintendo 3DS XL system, and by playing this game on a 3DS system grants access to the thumb pad. And honestly, using that felt great. Having a proper joystick, even though it's technically only emulating the 8 directions of a D-pad, alleviated nearly all my discomfort. Even without access to a 3DS, there are ways to play this game on certain devices with a joystick, and that is absolutely the way to go. After the hurdle that is the D-pad, actually controlling the game is much closer to not only Sunshine, but 3D Land as well. Which is to say, I had a much better time with it than in 64. I had an easier time timing my jumps, aiming where I wanted to go, and the radius for grabbing edges is much more forgiving. Plus, moves like triple jumps that previously didn't let Mario grab ledges now do. It's all in all much more lenient when it comes to the platforming aspects of this platformer. And it's the first 3D Mario with a run button in the 64 version. Mario would pick up speed as he ran, and it frustrated me to no end. His speed determined his jump height, making any stage where I had to get up to a platform with not much runway a slog. I would inevitably miss the first jump, bounce off the platform, then slowly turn around to set up a backflip. In 64 DS, I held the run button and made the jump. A feature so useful, it was brought back for both 3D Land and 3D World. The camera being mapped to the touchscreen also felt a bit off. It controls much better than in the original. The rotational degree is much more incremental, and there's a button to center the camera behind the character's back. Most time, I wanted the camera at a certain angle, including every time I attempted to navigate a narrow platform. The game would let me do it. Walls do still block the camera from moving, so sometimes I had to rotate the camera 250 degrees the other way to achieve the correct angle, but it was nowhere near as big an issue as it was in the original. Being mapped to the touchscreen does make me miss the GameCube's C stick, heck, it even made me miss the N64's C buttons, but it was navigable at the very least. Nothing's perfect. The Bowser boss fights were surprisingly difficult. Getting the tailspin up to the right speed was so much harder without a proper joystick, even while playing on a 3DS. Much of the movement was improved, but sometimes turning characters or properly aiming jumps, especially that elusive side somersault, were still tough to pull off. But the steps Nintendo SP&D did to make the game feel more modern were all steps in the right direction. They also added minigames. A fresh copy of the game has 8 unlocked, 2 per character, with the rest found by tracking down bunnies that have been added to the castle. Each character has 7 bunnies to track down and catch, each releasing another key to the rec room, totaling 36 games overall. These are pretty cool. As a kid, I spent hours with my favorites. Nowadays I look at them more as a novelty. None are especially better than early mobile fare, but there are some real gems. Just to see if I could do it, I got wanted to over 1,000, the score itself apparently capping at 9999. It's maybe not the best game. For instance, if one's good enough, like myself, it basically cannot end. But seeking out Luigi as he's hidden behind a bunch of other faces tingles something in my mind. I also really enjoyed the trampoline ones or the slingshot ones. Luigi's pair matching minigames were excellent, and my all-time most fondly remembered favorite has to be Sort or Splode. I love putting bombs in the correct pens. Many of the others were so basic they're not even worth mentioning, but minigames as a whole were really neat additions, especially back then. This time around, I didn't have a chance to re-experience the multiplayer mode, but child me would say it was great. Adult me would get tired of the 4 stages pretty quickly, but running around and beating up other Yoshis, trying to get the most stars and coins, donning caps when I could, then when in the lead, desperately trying to avoid the others, well, it still sounds like a blast, at least for a while. Most importantly, one last feature was added. When the DS is closed, Mario says, "Bye bye," and when it's reopened, he says, "It's a me, Mario."
It's me, Mario. Bye-bye.
Perfect game. In the end, Super Mario 64 DS is great. It is the definitive version of Super Mario 64. It took everything that was great about the original, polished it with more precise controls and more detailed visuals, adding great new elements with extra characters and updated levels, making it the ultimate adventure through Peach's Castle. This title, maybe more than any other in the Super Mario platforming series, is heavily colored by nostalgia for me, and that's okay, because we can all agree Mario 64 is pretty darn good. I just prefer this flavor over the original taste. Now let's rank this game. As a reminder, the current 3D ranking list is 7. Super Mario 3D Land, 6. Super Mario 64, 5. Super Mario Sunshine, 4. Super Mario Galaxy, 3. Super Mario Galaxy 2, 2. Super Mario Odyssey, and 1. Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. Obviously, it's better than Super Mario 64, and that we all can agree. And while I do love Sunshine, and given the choice, I'd probably play it over 64DS, I think the fact that 64DS has the wonderful levels from 64 without being bogged down by the earlier iterations' physics pushes it ever slightly above my other childhood favorite. Our new ranking is 8. Super Mario 3D Land, 7. Super Mario 64, 6. Super Mario Sunshine, 5. Super Mario 64 DS, 4. Super Mario Galaxy, 3. Super Mario Galaxy 2, 2. Super Mario Odyssey, and 1. Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. It's great, but it's no Galaxy. The entire top 4 consists of absolute juggernauts. And while that is it for the Super Mario remakes throughout the years, there is one more title to rank. In 2023, Nintendo revisited the 2D Mario series, finally breaking away from the new Super Mario mold, a mold that was used for 13 years. After giving it some time to marinate in my subconscious, I'm finally ready to revisit and properly rank Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on Super Mario 64 DS in the comments. Were you also just in the right age bracket for the DS to completely warp your brain? While you're here, let me know if you liked this by leaving a rating, maybe subscribing, or messaging me on social medias. I'm at MarioWaith everywhere, the links are in the description. Also in the description are a couple sources I pulled for this video. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.